The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to take the floor today in support of Bill C-6, an act to amend the Citizenship Act. I'd like to begin with a list, Madam Speaker.
Argentina, China, Germany, Grenada, Haiti, India, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Poland, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, Scotland, Somalia, South Africa, Switzerland, Tanzania, Trinidad, Uganda, the United Kingdom, and the United States. What do these countries have in common, Madam Speaker? They're all nations from where members of this House hail. 41 members of this chamber, spanning 4 different parties, are citizens of Canada who were born outside of this country. I'm one of that group of 41 members, Madam Speaker. I was born in Uganda and arrived here as a young refugee in 1972. This bill, Bill C-6, says to me and 40 of my fellow MPs that our citizenship is no different than that of our Canadian-born colleagues. In fact, Bill C-6 says to millions of Canadians who naturalized here after arriving from overseas that their citizenship has the same value and is accorded the same respect as the citizenship of those born in this country. It tells them that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Allow me to explain, Madam Speaker. Bill C-6 reverses the divisive legacy of legislation enacted by the previous government. Under what was then called Bill C-24, the previous government enacted legislation that allowed persons born abroad to be stripped of their citizenship on the basis of acts against the national interest, treason, spying, terrorism. But this applied only to those born abroad. So if someone, Madam Speaker, was born in Canada and committed the exact same criminal act against the national interest, their citizenship could not be stripped. Canadian-born individuals would be dealt with by the criminal justice system alone, whereas foreign-born Canadians were subject to a double penalty: punishment under the criminal justice system, together with revocation of their citizenship under the Citizenship Act. The old legislation enacted by the previous government was wrong, Madam Speaker, for 2 reasons. First, because it was unfair and unequal. We heard about the unfairness of the old Conservative legislation from strong immigration advocates, like Legal Aid Ontario's Refugee Law Office and Romero House in my riding of Parkdale High Park. The inequality of the old legislation was laid bare by the litigation it caused, Madam Speaker. The BC Civil Liberties Association and the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers brought a charter challenge to Bill C-24, contending it created 2 tiers of citizenship. Second, and more importantly, the old Bill C-24 was flawed, Madam Speaker, because it sent the wrong message to newcomers. People like me, Madam Speaker, who fled their homelands to make a fresh start in Canada, are thankful for the opportunity to be here, but ultimately we all seek the same thing: full and final integration. The previous government's Bill C-24 failed such Canadians precisely because it rendered them more vulnerable. It told them that they are citizens, but citizens with an asterisk, Madam Speaker. By retracting the odious legislation the previous government passed, what we are doing is saying to me and millions of other Canadians who came here from other countries that the politics of division are over, that you do indeed belong. Mais c'est assez.
But enough about the old legislation, Mr. Speaker. I want to address the merits of Bill C-6.
C-6 meets what we like to call the triple E test. It is evidence-based, it makes economic sense, and the bill is ethically sound. Allow me to address each of these points in turn. First point, Madam Speaker, Bill C-6 is evidence-based. Our government campaigned on a commitment to return to evidence-based policy, and that is precisely what Bill C-6 represents. Studies demonstrate that facilitating a path to not only obtaining but maintaining citizenship promotes the better integration of newcomers and their sense of belonging. This point has been reinforced to me time and time again by settlement and community groups doing important work in Parkdale High Park, such as Ukrainian Canadian Social Services, such as the 4 Villages Community Health Centre, such as the Canadian Ukrainian Immigrant Aid Society and the Canadian Polish Congress. Point 2, Madam Speaker, Bill C-6 is good economics. These very same studies show that this bill will have clear economic benefits for Canada. Immigrants who are given a path to permanence through citizenship have higher educational and economic outcomes. This point has also been communicated to me in my riding by terrific organizations on the front lines of settling newcomers in Toronto, like Parkdale Intercultural Association, the Parkdale Community Recreation Centre, Culture Link, the Parkdale Community Health Centre, and Polycultural Immigrant and Community Services. Madam Speaker, Bill C6 is also ethically sound. Until the previous government's decision to enact the old Bill C-24, we never had two tiers of citizenship in this country. It is not morally justifiable to divide citizens among those fortunate enough to be born here versus those who naturalize after arriving from overseas. Mais notre nouveau projet de loi fait beaucoup.
But our new bill does much more than eliminate the two tiers of citizenship created by the Conservatives. Madam Speaker, as I've indicated, Bill C6 also facilitates obtaining citizenship in several important ways, which I'd like to turn to now.
The barriers to citizenship which will be removed by this bill are many. I propose to address four, Madam Speaker. First relates to the length of time required to qualify for citizenship. Our legislation will require an applicant to be present in Canada for 3 years over a 5-year time span, rather than the current 4-year requirement over a 6-year time span. So this bill will expand the pool of potential citizens and allow them to apply earlier. More specifically, Madam Speaker, Bill C6 is more flexible. It doesn't require a person to be in Canada for at least 183 days per year over each eligible year. Instead, one needs simply to be here for 1,095 days over a 5-year period. What does that mean, Madam Speaker? It means flexibility. If one's job takes you overseas for extended periods, this does not make you automatically ineligible for citizenship. Second, Madam Speaker, Bill C6 restores the knowledge and language testing requirement to the previous age range. The previous government passed legislation indicating that testing would be required for any applicant age 14 to age 64. We're restoring that age range back to the previous norm, which was age 18 to 54, Madam Speaker. This change will improve access to citizenship for the very young and for those 55 and over, thereby help speeding up their formal integration. Third, the intent to reside provision is being removed. Bill C6 will no longer make it a requirement to declare your intent to reside in Canada before becoming a citizen. That requirement was unmerited. Madam Speaker, all Canadians have mobility rights. More importantly, the old requirement created a great deal of confusion. Over 200 applications were returned to individuals who failed to complete the intent to reside provision portion of the application because they didn't understand it. They feared their citizenship could be revoked if they moved abroad. Madam Speaker, it cannot. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, Bill C6 will allow time spent in Canada prior to becoming a permanent resident to count towards one's 3-year requirement to become a citizen. This provision allows for a 50% credit for time spent in Canada prior to becoming a permanent resident, up to a maximum credit of 1 year. Who will this help, Madam Speaker? It will help temporary foreign workers. It will help international students. It will help protected persons by speeding all of these groups on their path towards citizenship. This makes sense, Madam Speaker. These people have already spent time here, they've already worked and studied here, they've already built an attachment to Canada. I turn now to one of the criticisms we've heard about this bill. Safety, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me to be crystal clear. Bill C6 does not imperil the safety of Canadians. Our government's commitment to safety is unwavering. We have a place for terrorists, Madam Speaker. It's called jail. We have a place to prosecute terrorists, Madam Speaker. That's called the criminal justice system. When you commit a crime in Canada, you are prosecuted by the criminal justice system. We don't need a Citizenship Act tool to address a criminal code problem. But there's also a broader, more philosophical underpinning to Bill C6, Madam Speaker. When you boost integration and you put in place mechanisms for success, you strengthen ties and loyalty to this country. This doesn't threaten our safety, Madam Speaker. It is part of a host of initiatives, such as our response to the Syrian refugee crisis, which demonstrates Canada's openness, our inclusivity, and our compassion. These efforts counter radicalization and reduce threats to our safety. In fact, Madam Speaker, I would say we do this better than any country in the world, and I'm proud to be part of a government that is restoring this reputation both here and abroad. Madam Speaker, il est également important de comprendre.
Madam Speaker, it's also important to understand that Bill C6 is not an outright rejection of all aspects of its predecessor, Bill C-24, enacted by the previous government.
C-24 have we decided to keep. There are provisions we've kept, Madam Speaker. but there are also provisions we've actually improved. For instance, we've kept the physical presence requirement rather than the term residence because physical presence is easier to verify. Revoking citizenship based on fraud and misrepresentation has existed since 1947, and this power remains in Bill C-6. Bill C-24, passed by the previous government, facilitated fraud detection, which is very important, and we've kept provisions that make this possible, as well as provisions that permit government to strip people of citizenship quickly when they have committed fraud. But more importantly, we've also enhanced some of these provisions, Madam Speaker. For example, we've added a section that allows us to seize documents used in the commission of fraud. Finally, we've also committed to implementing all of the Auditor General's recommendations regarding preventing citizenship fraud. Madam Speaker, another improvement relates to conditional sentence orders. If convicted, time served in a community on a conditional sentence order can no longer count towards your 3-year residence requirement. And if one is on a conditional sentence order, one cannot take the oath of citizenship. Again, improvements on the predecessor legislation. Madam Speaker, let's talk about committee. The bill has just returned from the Standing Committee on Immigration. We are also a government that believes in working across the aisles. So when at committee, amendments that were proposed that made sense, that conformed with the policy direction that we're pursuing with this legislation, that improved this bill, we didn't hesitate to accept those amendments, Madam Speaker. Those amendments help us create a more diverse and inclusive Canada. One of the amendments added by the NDP added the term statelessness as a ground on which citizenship may be granted at the discretion of the minister. Another NDP amendment requires the minister to consider reasonable measures to accommodate the needs of citizenship applicants with disabilities. Those are amendments proposed by the opposition, which we accepted on their merit, and we welcome them as part of this new bill. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I want to return in my remarks to where I began. When I provided you a list of the 22 different nations that make up the homelands of members of this House, Madam Speaker, it was simply to provide you with a snapshot of the diversity of this chamber. But this chamber serves as a proxy for this country, a country that is made up of literally millions of individuals whose provenance extends to every corner of the globe. To that diverse group, Madam Speaker, Bill C-6 says your citizenship is no less valuable, no less respected than that of a citizen born in this country. But I believe one of the lasting attributes of this bill is one that has actually been rarely discussed. In facilitating pathways to citizenship, Bill C-6 also facilitates pathways to participation. Only citizens can cast votes in this country, Madam Speaker. Only citizens can stand for election to this chamber. By breaking down barriers to citizenship and putting in their place opportunities to obtain and retain citizenship, Bill C-6 promotes the highest level of engagement possible, engagement in our democratic process. Madam Speaker, the ultimate job of any government, regardless of its political stripe, is to promote an engaged citizenry. That is precisely what Bill C-6 will do. I'm proud to endorse this bill as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. Merci beaucoup.
Questions and comments?